When you think about the year 2000, there's plenty of things that come to mind. Maybe it's the video games and consoles that defined the era, such as the launch of the Sony PlayStation 2 and the inevitable collapse of Sega as a hardware manufacturer. Maybe it's the sweeping curves, the glowing swooshes, the branding trends that were used by tech companies and companies trying to appeal to that audience all the same. Or that strange period where architects seemed to have an obsession with building enormous fabric roofs in science museums. If only they had known about wind. At the turn of this new millennium, brands were racing against each other to look more modern and forward-thinking. Phones began to get smaller and more portable in our hands, the internet was beginning to enter everyday life, and technology promised a future that felt more faster, sleeker, and ever more connected than ever before, connecting the entire world to more culture and experimentation. Design helped reflect that, considering that everything needed to look futuristic, aerodynamic, and ready for a new world. This style would later be recognised as the Y2k aesthetic. But why were brands so obsessed with building a futuristic look, and why decades later has it become popular again, even amongst people who weren't alive when the millennium arrived? In this episode, I want to talk about Y2k. Now before I elaborate into any specific brands or trends, we need to establish what Y2k is. Obviously, Y2k literally just means year 2000, written in a way that sounds like computer shorthand, ironic. But the aesthetic didn't really have a name until 2016, when Evan Collins, part of the online community Consumer Aesthetics Research Institute, or CARI for short, started envisioning different definitions and descriptions of design eras. This has led to graphic design era names such as Vector Heart, Chrome Core, McBling, Y2k Futurism, if but to just name a few. And I should clarify, this isn't mutually exclusive to just the year 2000, as many brands have continued to use Y2k aesthetics even after their sell-by date, all of which are basically subterms of the era, meaning Y2k is pretty hard to define as one system. But in layman's terms, think metallic gradients, rounded techno fonts, blue silver color palettes, glassy, transparent, glossy, see-through technology, and orbit space-like theme. It'd probably be easier if I spoke about the brands that defined this. Now, we can't talk about Y2k without mentioning technology and the trends that followed it. Semi-transparent tech was everywhere. Computer mice, video game consoles, mobile phones, all of them had a shared trend of being high-tech and transparent with customers, quite literally even. The iMac G3, for instance, even though it launched in 1998, it practically started a phase for manufacturers to start designing their brand with transparent plastic casing. Or even the Nintendo Game Boy, which started getting variations that started Nintendo's own transparent, translucent drive that lasted all the way into the Game Boy Advance. Even Sony joined in. The original PlayStation itself rarely appeared in translucent plastic outside limited editions, but controllers and memory cards certainly did, and it was almost common to see a transparent PlayStation controller. Brands wanted you to trust in their ideas so much that they tried to design around high-tech and simplistic fonts. We didn't just type like this, we typed in all lowercase, emphasized text without needing to change their weights, maybe surrounded it in a bubble or two, maybe cut a corner here and there, rounded even. This is often the way brands communicated, because you didn't need flat, minimal design, but forward-thinking ideas, brushed metal, shiny, glassy aesthetic. Do you get where I'm going with this? TV channels in the 2000s were often some of the more experimental designers of the era. Networks like MTV, Nickelodeon, Tech TV, Fox Kids, Sci-Fi, E4, some even predated the advent of emojis, or at the time, emoticons, to even telling them when a show was on. What does 5 dots even mean? Friday, obviously. MTV are obviously the trendsetters here as well, as much their identity, even in Europe, explored that metallic environment and chaos that would symbolise and define the 2000s culture. After all, this was the era of jackass and scantily clad music videos that they would never get away with now. MTV by this point started to regionalise their feeds, and this did eventually result in them splintering their own identities in the years that followed. But in most of the idents in the 2000s, they were very video game-esque, very wireframey, very futurism, and bubble-like. This influence didn't just affect television, as the rise of computers led to the growth and explosion of the internet and operating systems. Windows XP, for instance, felt shiny and gradient-filled. All the buttons felt like real buttons you could touch. Windows Media Player 9 as well felt like a visual delight for the eyes, with its curved edges and gizmo-like look, and even Winamp was popular at this time, with everyone having their own skins to their own liking. Y2k really felt like a way for people to express their personality. Nothing felt rigid or flat. everything bounced off the screen. Websites felt like adventures as well, as each and every website all had their own unique twists, using plugins like Flash, RIP, to make their websites feel interactive. Many even making their own web pages using site hosters like GeoCities, Angelfire, DreamHost. It was a good time to be part of the internet as many started to realise the full potential of it. Companies jumped on the opportunity to do. They weren't just selling a product or idea, but they were selling their brand. Xbox, Sony, PlayStation, Nickelodeon, Nintendo, Hotmail, Napster. I could go on. The rapid growth of the internet, with websites launching near enough every day, led to a bubble, the dot-com bubble, where tech companies were massively overvalued. Eventually, the market corrected itself, and many websites unfortunately vanished overnight. However, in 2001, a tragic event struck the United States that changed the global mood almost overnight. The September 11 attacks.
At this early stage, we believe that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center in New York.
The futurism and high-tech aesthetic suddenly seemed so out of place, especially when most of the world was shaken from the events that transpired. The millennium was filled with hope and excitement for the years that followed, and eventually the world started to think that future never came. So why pretend it was coming? Over time, brands started grounding their brands in less chaotic and more grounded branding, out with neon, chrome, glassy aesthetics, and in with flat, minimalistic, but still very 2000s-esque branding. Y2k didn't die per se, but it eventually evolved. Audiences grew up. Simplicity began to feel more trustworthy than creating grand spectacle. One company that was at the helm of this shift was Apple. Jonathan Ive and the team at Apple slowly introduced minimalism to their devices and operating system, ditching the serif fonts from Myriad Pro. Their logo would soon lose the Y2k glassy gradient and become just a flat grey symbol. Well, okay, they did have some shiny glassy logos, but that was always just temporary for them, and their approach became simple as their OSs. The fall of Y2k also gave rise to Frutiger Aero into the mid-2000s, a name derived from the Frutiger typeface and the glossy Aero interface of Windows Vista. This style kept up some of the optimism of Y2k, but refined it into something more softer and approachable. Blue skies, water droplets, glass bubbles, and brighter gradients that felt more standardized than chaotic. So essentially an evolution of the Y2k trend, but made for a more friendlier audience. This graphic design trend would become popular as a common TikTok and Instagram topic. During major world events like the COVID-19 pandemic, nostalgia for the early internet era grew online. As conversations about automation and artificial intelligence increased, many designers and passionate tech enthusiasts began revisiting older aesthetics, a time when the internet still felt personal, experimental, and human-driven, and not driven by algorithms or tech oligarchs. While Y2k never truly disappeared, it certainly lost its shine and gloss in the years that followed. Many companies dismissed it as a passing trend and quietly moved on. But like most design movements and memes of today, it never really vanished or evaporated into dust. It simply waited for the next generation to rediscover it. Because for many people, Y2k represents something more than just chrome textures and translucent plastics. It represents a moment in time when the future felt exciting, and the internet still felt like an adventure, when technology and gaming gave us all the excitement and rush of action that we needed, when TV still felt watchable, and the identities all felt uniquely designed for an audience who bought into the hype. Maybe someday we'll see flat minimalism fade away and gradients return once again, as websites like NeoCities and NecoWeb harken back to the days of our own spaces online, and many reject the modern forms of social media today. Maybe that day might be soon. Maybe we should do this as an act of protest, go back to the days when we hosted our own stuff on our own websites, and maybe, just maybe, we should stop building stuff with fabric. I mean, come on, have you seen how brittle the Millennium Dome was?